Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September meeting of the Cabinet. For the public record, we have Cabinet members present in the room who will introduce themselves in just a bit, as well as a number of senior officers. Some non-Cabinet members are also present, and additional officers also will be joining the meeting virtually online. If any virtual attendees wish to speak, they should indicate with the yellow hand icon, and we will pick this up in the meeting. And this meeting is being streamed live and recorded by the council for subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site. So I'm going to start by asking Cabinet colleagues to introduce themselves and please state their portfolio areas. I'll start with myself, actually, Councillor Perai Ahmet, and I'm the leader of the council. If I can go to Councillor Williams.
Hi, Councillor Sarah Williams, Cabinet Member for Housing and Planning and Deputy Leader.
Lucy Nesneves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Seema Chandwani, Cabinet Member for Resident Services and Tackling Inequality.
Donna Carlin, Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Services.
Zena Brabazon. Sorry. Cabinet Member for Children, Schools and Families.
Mike Kikata, Climate Action, Environment and Transport.
I'm Emily Arkell, Cabinet Lead for Culture and Leisure.
Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for Placemaking and the Local Economy.
EstherOvat, Cabinet Member for Communities.
Thank you all. And when other speakers come forward, can they please introduce themselves and state their job titles or positions? Okay, is there any apologies for tonight?
None received, Chair.
Item 3, urgent business. There are no new items of urgent business, but we do have an additional appendix to consider along with item 14, which is the local plan. And these are the comments minutes from the Strategic Planning Committee, which considered the report on the 10th of September. And this was after the publication of the Cabinet papers. And there is a constitutional requirement to consider the comments of this committee as we are considering a policy framework document. And for this reason, I do accept the late appendix for consideration with item 14. And can we also please note that Cabinet members received a letter from the Pink and White Alliance today commenting on item 14. If I can move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest. Can Cabinet members please indicate if they have a declaration of interest to make tonight? No declarations of interest. If I can move to item 5, which is the notice of intention to conduct business in private, any representations received and the response to any such representations. There were no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on the agenda. Item 6, which is to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of July as a correct record. Do we all agree? Agreed. Item 7, deputations, petitions and questions. There were none received. Item 8, matters referred to Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. There are none tonight. So if we can move to the first item, which is item 9, and that is the 2025-26 finance update. Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Leader. In March of this year, we set a budget that would right-size funding for our services. In 24-25, the cost of social care rose by 8.5% and the cost of temporary accommodation went up by 51% in Haringey, and we took that into consideration. We increased funding to cater for the overspend on services for the most vulnerable, to match the increased numbers coming to us for support and the increased cost of that support. However, this financial year, we continue to face sustained rises in the cost and need for social care and temporary accommodation. 80% of service spend is now spent on those services in Haringey. The report shows a projected growing overspend driven primarily by the cost of providing temporary accommodation and adult social care. The forecast cost of adult social care is expected to be 7.5 million higher in Q1 than the outturn for 24-25, with a rise in the number of people requiring support packages has now risen from 3,895 to 4,000. The cost of our local public services this year is now predicted to be £35 million higher than that which was budgeted. There is some slippage in the delivery of savings. Haringey has been making cuts to services for the past 15 years, and we are really scraping the bottom of the barrel. Dedicated work is being done to realise these savings, and we're taking proactive and creative action to look across the council at wherever we can to reduce discretionary spending while maintaining service standards and services. The housing revenue account is affected by the rising cost of repairs and associated works, including cases of damp and mould and disrepair. A 20% reduction in disrepair cases from peak levels has been observed, and a projected 50% case closure rate by the end of the year, which will contribute to future cost containment in this area. The increased investment is necessary to bring our homes up to standard, so all our tenants and leaseholders live in homes that are well maintained and comfortable, a place they are proud to call home. Despite our difficult financial circumstances, we are still ambitious for our borough, and we work tirelessly to make the borough fairer and greener with the tools and the funds that we have. 98% of all our schools are good or outstanding. Haringey Children's Services was graded good by Ofsted, and SEND received the highest possible grading. Our capital programme is under constant review to reduce the revenue costs associated with borrowing, and a number of projects have been paused. However, our priority capital investments are continuing, especially where they save us revenue costs in the long run. We will continue to build new council homes, creating affordable homes that our residents need and reducing the costs that unaffordable housing causes for our other public services. We are well on the way to delivering our 3,000 new high-quality council homes by 2031, and there will be further reports in this session, with 725 completed and 24 completed and 2,000 under construction. Despite all the measures we have and are putting in place, the level of need does not match the funding we have. We continue to lobby and to make the case for fairer funding for boroughs such as ours.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin. Is there any questions from the Cabinet on this report? Councillor Dasnevs.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, given the pressure on the budget, what are we doing to make sure that we achieve our savings and that we improve and speed up our success in doing that?
We now have in place dedicated teams looking across the council at the savings to carefully assess whether the savings are deliverable, and if they are not deliverable, for us to find alternatives to actually plug that gap. I'm going to hand over to our Director of Finance to go into a little bit more detail about the work that she's doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin. So if I could just elaborate in a bit more detail. So the budget in 25-26 assumes 30 million delivery of savings, and we can see in the report that there are some of those that are at risk, those that are rated red and amber. What we're doing is that we have put in place a new monitoring system, particularly starting in this current year, whereby we're not only monitoring just the finance implications of the savings, but also the changes that are required to deliver the savings. So just not the numbers and the finances, but also that we are making the changes that we set out and we said we would do. We are monitoring those internally, so they're not reported in the report at this stage. You will see, however, that some of the 34 million overspend, as quite rightly highlighted, is due to the non-delivery of savings, and that really is going to be our focus for the second part of the year, to try and change as many of those ambers to green, but equally for the red to really understand whether those savings are no longer deliverable or they're just a risk in terms of slippage in timing, so that we've got a much better insight. And where they are, identify those mitigations that we can put in place, as Councillor Carlin has highlighted. You will also see in the report that kind of one of the ways to address both the slippage in savings, but also the non-delivery is also having a much tighter grip on our spending, and you will read in the report about some of the spending controls that we've got in place as mitigation. Thanks.
Thank you, Taryn. Councillor Chandwani.
Thank you, Nita. Councillor Carlin, it'd be really helpful to know what's driving the Q1 pressures on social care and temporary accommodation.
Thank you, Councillor Chandwani. Well, in adult social care, what we have seen, as I alluded to in my introduction, is that the numbers of cases that are coming through the door of people coming to us requiring adult social care has been increasing, and often the complexity of that care as well has also meant that the cost is often greater. We also have faced in that area additional costs to do with wage costs which are coming through, and so the service has become more expensive. In terms of temporary accommodation, we all know that London has a housing crisis, and unfortunately there's an acute shortage of temporary accommodation across London. What that has meant is that as best as we can, it's very difficult for us to secure temporary accommodation, and we often have to rely on nightly paid accommodation, which is incredibly expensive. The homelessness team, however, are putting in place a number of different measures to actually reduce this cost, to secure accommodation that we have, that either we own or that we secure. And so we are expecting that overspend, certainly in the medium term, the cost of temporary accommodation to hopefully fall. Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Brabazon.
Yeah, can I follow up on that question? And could you tell us whether any extra funding has been prioritised for the budgets that are under particular pressure this year?
Yes, we did. We have put in additional funding already. And unfortunately, although we put in the additional funding, the increase in the cost of those services has continued to rise. So for the budget of 25-26, we actually put in an additional £31 million into social care, an additional £12 million into temporary accommodation, but unfortunately this has not been sufficient.
Councillor Hagata.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just interested in the spending controls and how effective they have been since their implementation.
We've put in a number of spend controls to do with trying to stop discretionary spend, and I will hand over to Taryn, who can explain how the success that we've had with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin. So the spending control panel, which is something that's quite common across local authorities that are in a similar financial position in terms of limiting spend. The control panel has been in place now since around about April time. So they look at all non-statutory spend that's over £1,000. So there's quite a lot that's coming through the panel. So each service will need to put in essentially an application to have approval to spend. The panel up till the end of Q1, and I meant to actually get the latest figure as of today because it's now September, isn't it? The latest figure as at the end of Q1 is that the combination of between both the panel and also the directors who also consider spend, so some spend gets considered by directors before it gets onto panel, has actually avoided just over £1 million of spend that would otherwise have occurred. I mean, it's very time consuming, it's very challenging, but it's chaired, it's a group of senior officers that are kind of looking at that. They meet twice a week to consider all of those requests that come through. So it is having an impact. I think given some of the numbers you're seeing tonight and some of the kind of outlook over the next couple of years, it's likely to be a panel that's in place for some time. Thanks.
Any other cabinet members? No. Councillor Emery, who I believe is online.
Yes, can everyone hear me okay?
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Super. Yeah, 3 questions on this subject. So first question, the report states there is a risk that the assumed use of 37 million by the exceptional financial support will not be sufficient. Just wondering if you can quantify this risk. The second question then, in your conversations with government, has there been any discussions on a ceiling with the exceptional financial support? So if the finances weren't able to be brought under control, is there a level at which the government would seek any other intervention and commissioners, or is the government's current position that they will indefinitely support that situation? And then thirdly, the digital transformation savings for children's services are RAG rated red due to the business case concluding the target is unlikely to be hit. If the business case for these savings is only being put together now, how was the initial savings target agreed?
Thank you, Councillor Emery. Obviously, this is a Q1 report, and so it's quite early in the year. We are seeing this increase in pressure, as I have explained, but it's simply not possible at this point in time. We have a projection of what we are looking at based on Q1, which is what officers do to be prudent, but we're still early in the year to know exactly what that is going to look like towards the end of the year. So if you'll remember last year, we had, it can come down quite substantially when we look at everything that's available. So it's just not possible at the moment for us to predict exactly what that's going to look like. In terms of government support, really where government tends to send in commissioners, etc., is where they think that there's something really seriously wrong with what the council is doing. And at this point in time, there's no indication that Haringey is in that position at all. We are not in that position because we are flagrantly misusing the money that we have. We have not invested in any spurious and foolish financial products. Really, this is the problem that we have, is that our need in Haringey is not supported by the funding that we have. And what government will be looking for is that we recognise that need, and that we're doing whatever we can. But there has been no indication that they're looking at anything further. And I haven't been in those discussions, but I'm happy to hand over to.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of your first question, so we did set the budget back in March in terms of 37 million assumed exceptional support. You've heard a little bit about some of the controls that we've got in place and all the actions that we're taking to try to reduce our spend. The current forecast as set out in the report is 34 million, but as we say, we are doing everything we can to bring that down. I suppose essentially where we end up at the year end, wherever that 34 million overspend is, could potentially be an additional ask for exceptional financial support. But as Councillor says, we're doing everything that we can, but also looking for any one-off opportunities that we can bring into the budget. I should say also the 34 million overspend does exclude the use of corporate contingency. I think it is a bit early in the year to assume that we won't need to use any of that, but again, we are hoping that we can use the contingency to bring some of that down. But anything over any of that 34 million that remains could be potentially an additional ask. In terms of whether the government has set a ceiling, so the in principle agreement that we've got is for the 37 million that we set in the budget. If we anticipate we may require more, we will probably start those conversations in the autumn. The timetable, we believe, is very similar to that of previous years. So it's a bit early in the year. We haven't quite finished Q2, and essentially we would want to look at what the Q2 position is saying. And then just on your third question, I'll pass over to Anne. Thanks.
Good evening, Councillor. Thank you for your question. The answer to your question is that the service works very closely with digital services to find new ways, any ways that we can to explore savings in this area. I think it's appreciated that largely our work is with children and young people and families, and so we continually seek new ways to make savings in this area, and so that's what we're referring to by way of business cases that are in development. It's not one business case. It will be business cases to respond to need. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Councillor Emery. So no more questions. If we can move to the resolution, which is set out in page 3.1 to 3.9 of the report. This is on page 29 of the agenda. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, item 10, which is the 2025-26 corporate delivery plan update. I'm going to introduce this item, and I'll if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take them, but I may pass on to colleagues because the corporate delivery plan is across the whole council and encompasses the work that all my cabinet colleagues and the officers have been doing. So if I can just start. So the corporate delivery plan does set out our ambitious agenda for the council, and it does put into effect our vision for a fairer and greener Haringey. As we've just heard, we do continue to face huge pressures on our budget, and this is due to the increasing demand and costs on our social care and temporary accommodation. But despite these challenges, on the whole, good progress is being made across all themes, with 94% of outcomes having been rated as green or amber. We are investing in our parks, which are much loved and valuable assets for our community, and by asking residents to help shape these plans, we are delivering on our pledge for participatory budgeting as part of the Haringey deal. We do want our residents to feel empowered in local decision making, and we are also delivering on planting more trees, so we are a greener borough. With 90% of our schools ranked good or outstanding, we provide young residents the best start in life, and we have made very good progress on delivering 3,000 new council homes, which are vital in tackling our housing crisis. And I'm really pleased performance indicators in the Homes for the Future theme show a positive direction of travel, although there is still so much more to do in this area. The report also highlights areas where the council has not achieved the milestone or timescales we expected to, with an explanation of why this is the case, so we are transparent and will continue to drive improvement wherever we need to. So I'm really proud of the progress we're making as a council, and we will continue to focus on delivering for residents in Haringey. So if I can open up for questions, and where and if necessary, I'll pass on to relevant colleagues to pick up any in-depth questions. No questions here. Councillor Emery.
Thank you. Yeah, so 3 questions here, generally speaking, on complaints, fly tipping and repairs. So the first question on the complaints, on the top measure noted on page 175, which is the number of complaints upheld by the local government and social care ombudsman per 100,000 population. Haringey has been the worst performing borough in the country for 2 years in a row, and our performance declined from 13.8 complaints upheld per 100,000 residents to 20.2, which is obviously quite a steep decline there, 7% increase there. Just wondering why the performance in this area is so poor compared to elsewhere in the country. And then the second question on the fly tipping, obviously we're seeing quite increased incidences of fly tipping in the borough. Just wondering if that's a national trend, or is that something we're seeing more locally or part of North London? And then lastly, the performance on the repairs team. The performance in terms of repairs fixed first time is going in the wrong direction, and just wanted to get an update on that and trying to see why, how that priority is working out for us.
Thank you, Councillor Emery. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Chomani and Councillor Williams for the housing repairs. But before I do so, I just like to say that of course, we are lagging in these areas, but I think, as my colleagues will explain in just a bit, we do take this very, very seriously, and we are doing our utmost to help or to try and address these issues. So we don't take any of this lightly, and the volume of repairs and also complaints that we're dealing with is extremely, extremely high. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Chanwani, and then I'll come to Councillor Williams on the point on housing repairs.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Emery. We got a glimpse of your dog, I think, so it would be nice to see more of him or her as the meeting carries on. So in terms of the complaints, there is actually a item 13 is specifically on the feedback and resolutions paper, so I can go into more detail there. What I will say is, when we're compared to other boroughs, we're not a like for like. Not all boroughs are identical. So, for example, in Haringey, our parking service is in-house, and therefore our parking complaints will be classed as a council complaint. And in some other boroughs, it's not in-house, and then it's classified as a contractual complaint, and it wouldn't show up in these figures because it would go to the company, and vice versa. Obviously, a lot of our waste complaints go to Veolia. We also have a lot of services. Some boroughs don't have as many services as us. I'm not trying to detract from the fact that it isn't great news. I just don't like it when we're compared to other boroughs that might not have any libraries, might not even have any council housing, and therefore we're getting compared to them, and we're seen as like for like. So I just want to bear some caution on the data when we're compared, and then I'll go into more detail in item 13. In terms of fly tipping, yes, it is a growth in national trend. It's been going up year on year. Haringey is quite in an urban area, and a lot of our urban comparative boroughs are seeing similar trends. One of the things we are asking DEFRA for is a consistency in measurement. There are things that we class as fly tipping that other boroughs don't, because it's just labelled as misplaced household waste. So we do class that kind of bags of eggshells in a Sainsbury's carrier bag left next to a bin as fly tipping. Other boroughs do not, but it is a year-on-year trend. We have decided to take the council up on the government up on their offer to increase the fine limit to the maximum of £1,004 for fly tipping, and we, like our comparative neighbouring boroughs, are trying to get as hard as possible against perpetrators.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, did you want to come in on the repairs point?
So there's two metrics that have been referred to, and it's about fixed on first visit, but also on more complex repairs. So I'm pretty confident that all of that is going very much in the right direction, because also there was a backlog that's being dealt with as well. So it's the complex repairs that can't get fixed first time, due to various factors. It could be because of supply chain issues or contractor issues, etc. But our day-to-day business of the team is definitely something which I'm confident has gone in the right direction. And if you look on benchmarking figures, we're definitely on a par with others in the field.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Thank you, Councillor Emery and Chanwani. Okay, if we can move to the resolution set out in 3.1 to 3.3 of the report. This is on page 170. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. Item 11, which is 505 to 511 Archway Road, N6, and this is the permission to go to tender. Councillor Williams.
So this is another extremely good news story. As you know, it's a driving mission of this council to build fairer and a greener borough, and we are in a housing crisis, and we're seeing more and more local residents can't afford to rent, can't afford to buy in London. So in part of doing our part in addressing this situation, With financial support from both the Mayor of London and the government, we are building at least 3,000 new council homes, all at council rent. Numbers are essential, but we're also focusing as much on quality as quantity. We're building homes that will last with great installation standards, great interior and exterior design standards, and with a strong mix of family and individual homes. We make sure homes are well insulated, energy efficient as possible, because we want homes that aren't just affordable to rent, but are also affordable to run. 505 Archway Road will be another amazing example of this, with 16 new council homes right up in the northwest of the borough, designed using passive house insulation principles, powered by heat pumps, solar panels, and designed to minimise noise from the nearby main road. It is a brownfield site currently being used as a car wash, so we've also managed to get funding from the government's Brownfield Land Release Fund. So of these homes, there'll be 2 that are fully wheelchair accessible, 4 one beds, 8 2 beds, and 2 3-bedroom family homes. Proposals also include a private garden courtyard away from the main road, which will also have a children's play space. This is a really great contribution to affordable housing, real affordable housing in this borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any questions? Councillor Gasser?
You seem to be bringing one of those papers to each cabinet, to every cabinet, which is great to see. And you mentioned numbers are essential, but we're focused as much on quality as quantity. And I think we're seeing that in every new development as well, which is incredible. And obviously you mentioned specifically the environmental and the energy efficiency aspects. And I just wanted to check, because I know the team does work in terms of overheating. So we've talked about essentially keeping the house or the home warm, but about how we're addressing keeping them cool as we see progressively more, longer and hotter summers. And I'm just wondering if some of that thinking has already gone into this development yet, or is that still going to be worked out?
That's definitely a consideration on all of the new developments. Obviously, insulation works both ways. But I shall bring in Mr. Erdman on the detail of that.
Yes, so it's addressed in the report, but yes, we're providing appropriately sized windows to exposed elevations along with deep window reveals and Juliet balcony balustrading to provide passive shading. All the homes are at least dual aspect, some are multiple aspect as well. And this enables, them to all have openable windows that are away from the busy road that they're next to. And we've got passive shading to the larger windows in the south with the recessed balconies as well. So it's a key part of the design process, is thinking about how we make sure those buildings don't overheat, because you're right, we're putting a lot of insulation into them to keep them warm in winter. So we need to make sure they don't overheat in the summer.
Any other questions from the cabinet? Okay, Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question on this item. If this were to pass through the planning system, could you outline a brief or a basic timetable for the progress on this site?
Do you mean when residents would expect residents to move in? Is that the sort of timeline?
I suppose multiple, really, like forks in the ground and then moving in time.
Yeah, generally use spades rather than forks, but yeah, I'll bring Robbie back in.
So I mean, we're expecting it very, very soon at planning committee. So we're hoping to get that planning proven very soon. In terms of, we would expect to make a sort of GLA compliant start on site before March, and then with the sort of messy work starting that'll be the initial, very initial sort of enabling works with the sort of main works starting in June. I'd expect it to be about 18 months to 2 years after that.
Thank you, Robbie. I'm sure you'll keep ward councillors up to date as well on that. Okay, so we will return to the resolutions after considering the exempt information at item 27 on that. If I can move to item 12, which is the adopting the refreshed resident engagement strategy. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. So this is a refreshed look at how we're going to consider engaging and involving our tenants and leaseholders in the running of council housing services and the potential benefits that can bring. So housing services so far have undertaken a range of work to improve services for tenants and leaseholders through the housing improvement plan, where residents and leaseholders have played a central role in the implementation of several aspects of the plan, as well as monitoring performance on a regular basis. And many of the achievements of our resident engagement work have been highlighted in publications and recognised by inspectors during mock inspections, where they've commented on its quality and effectiveness. So the information contained in the report outlines the next steps required to build on the strong foundation established and to consider tenants and leaseholders' feedback, as well as lessons learned from the mock inspection and from learning from others. So I recommend that we improve the proposed refresh strategy so that we can continue to build on the good work established and bring to life our commitments for co-production and continuous engagement with those that receive our services. So residents have developed this strategy using their own words and ideas, helping to create a meaningful and structured direction. This framework for how we'll embed these models in the future, allowing the organisation to benefit from residents' views as they help design and shape our housing services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any questions from the Cabinet on this item? Okay, Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions on this one. Firstly, the forward of the strategy mentions an aim of involving residents from more varied backgrounds. Just wondering if you can give a bit of outline on this. And then the second question, the strategy mentions the council wants to build on existing positivity rather than treating issues in our communities as problems that needs to be fixed. I just wondered if you could just outline a bit what that meant in terms of concrete terms as well. And then finally, coming back to a different topic, why do you think the complaints about the repair service have continued to increase, even as satisfaction on managers like being listened to and being kept informed has risen? Just wanted to see if you could link those 2 things as being separate, really.
Thanks. So I'll have a start, Councillor Emery, and then I think I'll probably bring in maybe Jahed or Reda as well on some of the points. I think the point on saying we want to engage with people from varied backgrounds is we know there are some groups which just have a tendency not to put themselves forwards for these groups who have to work really hard to encourage engagement through all different kinds of ways that can happen, actually, rather than just normal sort of channels of put yourself forward. It could that people become community leaders through a community gardening project or something else that's happening where they live that might then be a stepping stone. So there's all kinds of work that's being done just to make sure that all residents from all communities are represented and have a voice at the table. The positivity question. I'd have to find the exact sentence you're referring to, but just as a starter, I would say, of course, engaging positively in a positive way is that it's not confrontational ever, and that we are open and listening and are not defensive would be my view on that in a general terms. I have the complaints rising is sort of similar to what Councillor Chandwani was speaking to earlier, but I'll let the team come in.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Jada Rabin, Director of Housing. So in terms of some of the existing work that we've been doing over the last 3 years, we've been really building the foundation of working really collaboratively and openly with our residents. So we're really fortunate. We've got 60 resident volunteers that form part of our formal resident engagement structures. And as part of some of the work that we've been doing over the last 2.5 years, we've taken them through Chartered Institute of Housing training. So they're housing professionals in their own right. So when we meet with them once a month to go through our key performance indicators, similar to tonight, they can really, have robust conversations around our performance and how we can continue to improve. They've been part of key decisions that we've been making in housing. So every single cabinet paper, where there's a strategy or policy that comes to cabinet, it actually goes to our resident voice board first, so they can have influence and input into those policy decisions based on their lived experience internally. In terms of some of the culture change that we've been doing, they've been invited to our all housing staff conference, where we promoted their exposure across our housing services staff. They've done internal deep dive reviews in our repair service, in our cleaning service, and made really good recommendations on how we can improve and how we can adopt. So it's a really open and transparent relationship we've got with our resident voice board, and one that we're really proud that we've built on. On the repair satisfaction, it's actually quite interesting. So when we do carry out repairs, the transactional survey shows satisfaction is usually above 80%. There's a slight variation with the TSMs, where we do that annually, and that will be based on the last repair a resident may have received, whether it's 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So the more relevant repairs satisfaction measure we use is the transactional one, where we ask them to complete the survey immediately after their repairs. Do you want to come on back on the first one?
Yes. Hi, thank you for the question. Reda Kaladi, and I'm the acting head of the resident engagement. Just on the point of including people from a variety of backgrounds, it's important to acknowledge first that out of all the individuals that we engage with at the moment, we have a huge diversity within those groups. So it's very, very important to know that, we do attract people from different backgrounds in any case at the moment, and it works well. But as Councillor Williams highlighted, there are certain communities where things are a little bit harder for them for a variety of reasons, and they may require different ways of getting involved. So as a result of that, the strategy highlights the need to create a digital channel through which we can gather that information. We get people involved and engaged, so that if people are not able to come to meetings or be part of groups, they are still able to comment and give feedback and give views that we can then use as intelligence to drive the improvements that we want to see within our housing services and to inform the work that we're doing. So we are committed to widening the pool of engagement by providing as many diverse ways of involvement that make things easy for people, even if they cannot be in a room like this. So that's the reason why we're committed to that. And as Jahed highlighted, we are building a good relationship with our formal engaged residents, and we want to build on that from a point of strength. So we're not working with them as adversaries, but we're working them as partners in this journey, and we want to see them part and parcel of how we evolve and how we develop our services going forward. So that's the reason for that positivity, is because we want to build on that strength. So we're using the strength-based approach to the work that we're doing within engagement.
Thank you, Jahed. Thank you, Reda. And having seen some of your work up close myself, I think you should be very proud of what you've achieved to date. Okay, so if we can move to the resolution on this, which is set out on page 3.1 of the report. This is page 246. Are we all in agreement? Thank you very much. Okay, if we move to item 13, which is the annual feedback and resolutions report 24-25, Councillor Chamwani.
Thank you, Leader. So this is a corporate-wide report with, and because of changes of how we do the report following the government code, it now comes to Cabinet. The complaints vary from dissatisfaction of services received to conduct of staff, or just wholesale objection to policy or a decision. And I think that's really important to acknowledge. There is a difference between somebody that might not like something the council's doing, i.e. charging them for visitor permits and complaining about that, versus somebody who had an officer that might have come to their home and done something that was of a bad conduct. So, but the problem is that they're all recorded the same. Over 4,000 complaints were received in the period of 24-25, and in Appendix A.4 you can see the breakdown of the complaints by surface area. I also want to note that adults and children's both have their separate complaints process, and so that's kind of in the appendix, but not in the kind of main report. In section 13 are case studies of how the council have learnt from the feedback and complaints, and complaints are kind of seen as a gateway to service improvement. Across the council, there's various boards been set up to drive change, like the Housing Improvement Board or the Adults Improvement Board. So there's a lot of things happening. We're not just passive and accepting it. There's real work being done across the council to address some of the systemic issues that are leading to some of these complaints. On that note, Leader, I'm happy to take questions, and the only thing that we've been asked to do today is to note the report.
Thank you, Councillor Chamwani. Any questions from the Cabinet on this report? Okay, Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions here. Firstly, the report notes the large escalation in the number of stage 2 complaints, highlights a need to review stage 1 processes to better understand and address the root cause of escalation. Just wondered if any of this review work has taken place already, and if so, what does it show? The second question then, what is the total amount spent by the council on rectifying ombudsman maladministration findings, including compensation and the cost of staff training? And then the last question is, why is the council continuing to show delays in responding to inquiries from the ombudsman and implementing remedies? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask either Kirsten or Claire to come back on I don't know if they have that information to hand around the costs of complaints that go to the regulators. In terms of the work that's been done, I think we just got to look at this in some form of perspective. So as our budgets get cut and the demand grows higher because people are not getting the services that they need in a timely manner or in the quality and quantity they need, the complaints team is not growing. So if you look at the data in the appendix, the complaints were about 2,500 a few years ago, and it's gone up to 4,000. The number of staff in the complaints team has also reduced, but the demand on their time has nearly doubled. So there is going to be delays in how people are responding to some of the complaints and how things are going from stage 1 to stage 2. There is a lot of work around stage 1. We do need to accept and acknowledge in the beginning that we have made errors and kind of rectify them at stage 1, and a lot of work's been done by the team to kind of change the culture really around the organisation. It's okay to say that we messed up, and it's okay to acknowledge that, and it's okay to accept that. And I think the work that's been done in the last few years has really kind of taken us away from being quite defensive and pushing us to say, look, we didn't do as well as we could here, and this is why. There are some things that are systemic, and I don't think that's unique to Haringey. So, for example, I know some people have put in complaints about how long they've had to stay in temporary accommodation, and they're really legitimate. And for those families or those people stuck in temporary accommodation, it's a horrible experience for them. But the housing crisis is not been created by Haringey or not unique to Haringey, and therefore it's a systemic issue that would lead to complaints, and this is why we're really pushing to build more housing, but the housing won't be built within 10 working days. It's going to be a good 10-year program to even get half of what we need. So I just want to put some of these complaints into perspective. I would, if I was stuck in temporary accommodation for 4 or 5 years, of course I'd complain. But is it necessarily a council failure, or is it a wider failure of national policy that's led to this, and things not having things like rent cap, and how they ended up homeless in the first place? So there's a lot going on that's kind of contributing. There's a lot of context. Before I make a huge prime ministerial speech, I'm going to hand over to Kirsten and Claire to talk about the costs, and if anything else you want to add for question 1 and 3 as well.
Hi there, I'm Claire McCarthy, Director of Strategy, Communications and Collaboration. Just on the compensation, the total amount of compensation paid as a result of findings of the Housing Ombudsman is in the report, but actually the amount of compensation to the local government as a result of local government ombudsman findings isn't. I'm sorry, we didn't include that for some reason, but we can follow up with you in writing, Councillor, to provide you with that information, and next year we'll make sure that both figures are in the report. Just on the delays in responding to ombudsman cases, I think one of the things that we have seen is an increase in the number of cases being escalated to the ombudsman, both the housing ombudsman and the local government ombudsman. Now, there's not necessarily been a consequent number of cases investigated by the ombudsman, particularly the housing ombudsman, where actually only about half of the cases are investigated and taken forward, which shows that the housing ombudsman doesn't always think there's merit in that escalation in all cases. But one of the challenges that creates is that even if a case isn't taken forward to the investigation stage, it does create a huge amount of work for the council, so both in the feedback and resolutions team, but also in the relevant service. And that is something that is putting real pressure on our ability to then deal with all those ombudsman cases and requests for information in a timely fashion. It is something that we are really committed to improving on, and we are working really closely both with housing colleagues on the housing ombudsman cases and with colleagues across the council on other cases to try and improve on that. And we have actually brought in some additional resources, even within this difficult financial situation that we're in to enable to support that. So it's something that we take really seriously, but it is something, and I think it's partly as a result, you'll have seen, I think the housing ombudsman in particular has been really raising their own profile amongst, I think, tenants in particular, and I think that is having that consequential impact, and it's something that local authorities and landlords are seeing across the country, I think. So it is something that I'm sure is here to stay, and we just do need to make sure that we're as efficient as possible in responding to that increased number of escalations.
Thank you, Claire. So there's no more questions. If we can move to the resolution, which is in 3.1 of the report. This is on page 272 of the agenda. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. Item 14, which is the approval to consult on the Regulation 18 draft local plan. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to start by saying a massive thank you to Bryce and to Rob and Tim, who's not here this evening, but the amount of work that's gone into this has been really incredible, and I'm really grateful to them for that. So the local plan is the council's main planning document and provides both a vision and a framework for placemaking, as well as managing new buildings development and infrastructure in the borough. Our existing local plan was adopted in 2017, and since then a number of significant changes have happened, and these include changes to national planning policy and legislation, the adoption of a new London plan, the COVID-19 pandemic, a worsening housing crisis, this council's declaration of a climate emergency, and the revision of the council's strategic aspirations for Haringey, including the Haringey deal, and a new vision for the future of Haringey. The local plan is a key opportunity to help deliver the council's vision of what it wants for Haringey by 2035, a place where we can all belong and thrive. Furthermore, it is a key opportunity to deliver on the Haringey deal, allowing local residents, businesses and organisations to shape development and change in Haringey's communities and neighbourhoods, and for us to hear from hear the voices of those that are far too often overlooked. We also need to look ahead to the future, both in respect of exciting opportunities for Haringey, such as being London Borough of Culture 2027 as the Rebel Borough, and helping host the UEFA Euro 2028 men's football tournament, but also in addressing ongoing challenges such as the homelessness crisis and the housing affordability requiring a comprehensive and coordinated response. In this context, we need a new local plan to provide a robust and fit-for-purpose planning framework for the borough, which is effective as possible in achieving Haringey's priorities and addressing the issues we all face. We want to achieve a green borough that works for everyone. Now, in 2021, we carried out the first steps engagement on the new local plan to enable residents, businesses and other stakeholders to shape the plan from the very beginning before any policies were even drafted. Over 10,000 comments were received from over 1,500 individuals and organisations. We have considered all of the feedback received, and alongside the development of a comprehensive evidence base to help create and inform the new local plan, we have developed this draft local plan for consultation. This represents the Council's spatial vision for the future development and change in the borough, complementing the Council's overall vision for Haringey, and has been substantially shaped by the people it is intended to serve. Using the results of this consultation, the Council will update and refine the draft local plan and publish a submission local plan for consultation before sending the plan together with the consultation responses to the Secretary of State, who will appoint an independent planning inspector to examine it. So I very much encourage residents, businesses and other stakeholders to respond to this consultation and let us know your thoughts on whether the policies and proposals in the draft local plan most effectively address key issues such as fairness, health and well-being, and climate change. I'd also like this opportunity to make a comment to the Pink and Way Alliance that wrote to us earlier today and was noted at the beginning of this meeting. The central thrust of their letter was that we had failed to consider all material evidence. And I just want to provide assurance to the Pink and Way Alliance that at the same time as publishing this draft consultation, we will be publishing at the same time the Sites of Importance to Nature Conservation Review and also the employment land demand evidence, which hopefully will give them the reassurance they need since we met with them, well, not myself, the officers met with them in November 2024, and also an assurance which we will continue to engage with them throughout this consultation and going forward. And I'd also like to, sorry if I'm speaking too long, to say that this draft local plan is dedicated to local resident Nikki Gavron, who sadly died just over a year ago, aged 82. And she was a leading Haringey and London politician whose career spanned 50 years from the 1970s. She was the first Deputy Mayor of London following a successful career at Haringey Council and as Chair of the London Planning Advisory Committee, LPAC, and a Labour member of the London Assembly for 21 years. She was well known for her powers of persuasion and capacity just to get things done. She was elected Assembly member for Enfield and Haringey in the first Greater London Authority election in 2000 and was quickly appointed as Ken Livingstone's deputy. Nikki was extremely influential in the development of the first London plan, and she even managed to get Richard Rogers involved, and he created the Architecture and Urbanism Unit at the GLA, really trailblazing stuff. But keeping it local, it was the planned expansion of the A1 through Highgate into a motorway, which brought Nikki to local politics. Elected to Haringey Council in 1986 during the famous Bernie Grant reign when Thatcher was in power and battle swords were truly drawn. Nikki was a trailblazer, committed to improving families' access to outdoor space, widening participation in the arts and improving the environment. Ahead of her time, she led the way on policies to improve air quality and green spaces. Her legacy lives on in Haringey through Jackson's Lane Arts Centre and through all the policy initiatives that Nikki championed, making Haringey and London greener and fairer places to live and to work. And it's for these reasons that we would like to dedicate this local plan to Nikki Gavron. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Certainly having been subjected to Nikki's influencing and persuasion, I can certainly agree with all that you say, but thank you for those words. Any questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Hurkata.
First, I'd say that's amazing that this is that tribute to Nikki Gavron, and the fact that we're dedicating this local plan. I know that that would be so apt for her, that this would be our dedication to her. So that's fantastic. To echo your point as well, the work into this has been incredible, especially on the environment, decarbonising and sustainability aspects. I've said it to you before, I think, in terms of how this matches other local plans that are out there now that are seen as sort of best in class. I think this is the best in class. I think it absolutely has driven, the envelope, has pushed that envelope as far as possible, and has really put Haringey as a leader in this space, which is really incredible. This weekend, I bumped into an architect, as you do, and we started chatting about the draft local plan, as you do, in the middle of Lordship Rec, and they were talking about, well, they spoke about site allocations, which I thought was actually quite interesting. I never looked at it in this way, and I just thought it'd be really interesting for you to clarify. So she asked about how many site allocations were in it, and that is actually quite a significant, that's a number of significance. And I just wondered if you could share why that's significant, and if there are any changes in this plan to the previous plan in terms of those allocations.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of allocations for sites where we anticipate some development and change, there's over 100. I think it's around 124. So those are just sites where we anticipate there to be some development, whether it's housing or employment or a mix of uses. Then there are additional site allocations where we're talking about protecting sites for their nature conservation value or for employment purposes. So there are probably well over 1,000 in total, but in terms of development sites, it's just over 100.
And sorry, the significance of that number, as opposed to say if there were 80 or 150, is there some?
I think so. So one of the things the plan is seeking to do is to increase the supply of housing in the borough, increase the supply of affordable housing particularly. Central to delivering that is identifying as many sites as possible which are capable of delivering housing. So we've really left a kind of no stone unturned approach to finding sites that can contribute to that effort. And particularly we've identified many more in the west of the borough than we have done historically. So that's part of the significance, Councillor Hurkata.
Thank you, Bryce. Any more questions from the Cabinet? No. Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. Would firstly like to echo the comments on Nikki Gavron. Many Highgate residents speak fondly of her and have been relaying stories to me in the past year. So I'd just like to add to those comments there for sure. There's two questions on this. My first question follows up one I made last week in Strategic Planning Committee, in which the comment was made that the consultants used for the flood risk section were this was seen as an area the council lacked some expertise. Is the council looking to fill these gaps in on expertise, whether that would be in flood risk or wherever else consultancies were used, or is it felt that the knowledge is too sporadically needed to justify more staff in these areas? So that's the first question. And then the second question is the funding Haringey is receiving from MHCLG contingent on us completing the plan at the timescales set out in the report? Thank you.
I think I'm happy for you to take those questions.
Thank you. So in relation to your first point around flood risk, so I probably gave you a partially incomplete answer at Street Planning Committee. So part of it is about expertise, but the second part of that is around resource. So the council has expertise around flood risk in the council, but has a limited amount of it. In relation to that bit of flood risk evidence base you mentioned, the council's flood risk lead was closely involved in that the whole way through. But to ask us to do something like that in-house, with the detailed mapping and other types of technical things required, that would be very difficult. Secondly, in relation to MHCLG and the funding from them to deliver the local plan or help deliver the local plan. So we're not tied to any specific timescales, and I don't think there's any realistic threat of that money being taken away. But nonetheless, there is an expectation that we do get on with the job. But to date, they're very happy with our progress and where we're going with the draft local plan.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, if we can move to the resolution 3.1 of the report, page 308. So we all in agreement? Thank you. Item 15, which is the acquisition of 32 council homes at 255 Lordship Lane. Councillor Williams.
Well, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we are committed to building 3,000 generally affordable council homes. No, this is a this is a total good news story. We have received government funding to help with the housing crisis, and part of that is to not just build but also to acquire homes. So this is a block of 32 homes. Nearly the 80% 2 beds, and the upper floors will have private balconies, communal garden. It's got a good energy performance certificate. It's got solar panels, and yeah, I just recommend approval to my colleagues.
You'll have another opportunity at item 16 to be a broken record. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on this one? No. Okay. Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. Just the one question on section 15. If the council did not purchase these homes, what would happen with them? Would they be being sold at market prices?
Well, that's up to the vendor, right? It's not up to us. That's all I would.
They're currently owned by, they're private homes now. So they're currently owned by a private provider. 29 of the homes are private and 3 of them are intermediate. We're looking to convert those 3 intermediate to social rent, and the rest will be converted from private to social rent. So it would be up to the owner what they wanted to do with the properties.
Thank you, Robbie. Okay, so we will return to the resolutions after considering exempt information at item 28. Item 16, acquisition of 76 council homes at 313 the Roundway. Councillor Williams.
I mean, we are so fortunate to be in a position to be able to purchase these homes. It's an absolute stunning site. It's absolutely beautiful in close proximity to Bruce Castle Park and Bruce Castle Grade 1 listed building. They have private amenity on the site, so that's beautiful stuff. A new walk through directly into the park. The balconies, I mean, they are absolutely beautiful. And I'm extremely excited to get residents that are currently perhaps in temporary accommodation or homeless into these homes.
Councillor Brabazon.
Just, yeah, I know this site and have seen it being developed, and I agree they're nicely positioned and so on, notwithstanding the petrol station. But I'm just curious what the timescale would be for occupation once this goes through.
My politician answer would be pretty quick. But I need the team to give you if we actually have a target date.
The the developers saying end of October. There's always some health war. Developers always probably put a bit of a timeline on it, but I'd say yeah, it's pretty quick. If it's not the end of October, it'll be fairly soon after that. They're pretty much ready to go.
Okay, any more questions from the Cabinet? Okay, Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. Just a one question on this one, and a short one. When will you know if you've been successful in obtaining the GLA funding?
Yeah, I had hoped to have it confirmed today for the meeting, but I'm hoping within the next few days to have it confirmed.
Thank you, Robbie. So we will return to the resolutions after considering the exempt information at item 29. Okay, we can move to item 17, which is the business continuity policy. Councillor Carlin.
Thank you, Leader. This is a paper a policy which provides a framework for how the organisation at the council will manage in a crisis where where there is a risk to business continuity. There are a number of different scenarios that we could face. One of the scenarios is, of course, cybersecurity, and we know that has a cyber attack has affected other local authorities and indeed some rather large high street names. And so we need to make sure that in circumstances, whether it be floods, whether it would be a cyber attack, whatever those scenarios are, that we are able to keep our local public services going in these circumstances. And what this policy does is to set a framework, and then the different services will actually develop their own specific policies for how they go forward in their service. It is important, and it is a statutory requirement for us to do so, and we will be reviewing all the different services policies will be reviewed annually to make sure that they are up to date and fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin. Any questions on this item? Okay. Councillor Emery.
No questions on this item.
Thank you. So if we can move straight to the resolution, which is on 3.1 of the report, and this is page 1871 of the agenda. Are we in agreement? Thank you. Okay, item 18, which is electrical security assets management. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. So we've heard a lot this evening about our investments in new homes, but we also must invest in our existing council homes in the borough, and that means that they're safe, they're warm, they're comfortable. And so we are putting major long-term investment into our housing through the £570 million estate renovation plan that's going to see thousands of existing council's homes retrofitted and refurbished over the next 10 years. And this investment is sort of part of that plan, and it's going to upgrade the electrical infrastructure that the security systems in our buildings rely on. It will allow us to introduce electronic fob access to more of our estates, but also to modernise CCTV cameras and do more remote monitoring. The investment's also going to head off some of the costly power failures that come with outdated electrical systems, and it is an investment that will save us money in the long run and minimise future risks and disruptions for residents on our estates. We know there's a lot to do, but since bringing the council housing back under direct control, we sort of had a good look at what is needed, made a comprehensive plan for action, and this is just another part of getting all of this renovation work done across all of our estates. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any questions from the Cabinet on this item? Okay, Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. Just the one question on this one. How long will replacing all existing door entry systems take, do you think?
I think that's a very good question, Mr. Emery.
Good evening, Scott Kay, Assistant Director for Repairs and Compliance. I suppose it's a bit like painting the Forth Bridge. I've been upgrading and replacing them for a while through previous contracts and will continue to do so. One of the core aspects of this contract is replacing the modems, which allows the signal to be transmitted around the building for the fob access and links the infrastructure together. And so partially this is generated from the phasing out of the 3G network. And so we have to upgrade the modems in the buildings to 5G compatibility anyway. So the rest of the infrastructure within there, the kind of fascia panels and the locks and the latches that are attached to it, and the cabling are replaced on an as required basis. So it's just an ongoing process, really.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so we will return to the resolutions after considering exempt information at item 30 on this. If we can move to item 19, which is the Haringey Education Strategy. Councillor Brabazon.
Thank you. The education strategy has had a long period of development, and in introducing it, I'd like to say it has been done in partnership and co-production with heads, governors, representatives of partner agencies, and complies with our own vision for community participation in the Haringey deal. And it seeks approval for the implementation of the strategy from 2025 to 28, applying to all children and young people 0 to 19 across the borough, starting hopefully from the approval this evening, should Cabinet agree it. It's a comprehensive roadmap aimed at ensuring every child and young person is supported in the borough and covering several different areas. And of course, I'm delighted to introduce it, knowing how much work and debate has gone into it. The borough has around nearly 60,000 children and young people between the ages of 0 and 19, and approximately 9,000 of those children have special educational needs and disabilities. We know that over 180 languages are spoken and across the borough, so working in that complex framework requires us to have an overarching approach. As we always say, our schools are 90% rated good or outstanding. And that doesn't come just like that. It's obviously an enormous amount of hard work from the educators, the teachers, the support workers, the teaching assistants, the administrators, the caretakers, the governors, everybody who makes a school an institution, and of course the hard work of the children and their parents. And we are really proud of education in our borough. We've seen excellent results this year from the good level of development for the reception age right through to the A levels. We have 8 key priorities forming the basis of the strategy, which are in the report, so I won't go through them here. But just to say, it covers all aspects, including the very, very complicated areas around school admissions, school place planning, relationships with other services, particularly housing and placemaking. And it is recommended that that Cabinet approve the strategy. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon. Any questions from the Cabinet on this item? Councillor Catter.
Know that we've been surpassing our ambitions in terms of SEND and education and schools. There's the Education Strategy Board, which I don't know whether I couldn't see whether in the report it was actually mentioned as its purpose. Obviously, the terms of reference say that's there for the delivery of the strategy. Just wondered if this was a new thing, and so hasn't actually existed before, and two, is it something that has been sort of embraced by the stakeholders that Councillor Bravazan has just sort of listed out? Thanks.
I'll give you the headlines and then I'll pass to Anne because Anne chairs it. We developed the strategy board precisely to oversee the development of the strategy, and so that we make sure that it's steered in the right direction. So it's not looking at all the minutiae of everything, but the overall direction of travel. And as I said, you can't work. Anybody who's ever worked in education will know that it's so fragmented. You have to work with all the different elements, partners, of which the school's obviously a vital part. But you have to make sure you have talked to everybody. Otherwise, they will be very irritated. And that's the aim of the strategy, is to oversee it and bring the partners together. I don't know if you want to add anything, Anne.
Thank you, councillors. Yes, I absolutely agree that the Education Strategy Board was set up to develop the education strategy. And now that we've concluded that piece of work, that group will come together, probably once we have the anticipated schools white paper, to consider how we will further develop our education strategy, taking into account what that says. And though this, as Councillor Brabazon says, this isn't focused on the day-to-day management and management of every school and what it delivers, it is on the wider strategic direction for education in the borough. Thank you.
Any more questions from the Cabinet? Okay, Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions on this. First question, one of the goals of the strategy is to secure equity in terms of experience and outcomes. Just wonder if you could outline how you define equity in this context. Second question then, the strategy mentions historic underachievement from Black Caribbean and Black African students and of Turkish / Kurdish students at primary level. And that attainment is generally lower in the poorer east side of the borough. Has the analysis compared these different factors together to see if, for instance, Black Caribbean students in the west of the borough perform more similarly to white British students in the west, or to Black Caribbean students in the east, for instance? And then lastly, several of the KPIs mentioned are either to increase X or improve Y, but with no actual target measure laid out. Just wondering why that was. Thank you.
Thanks for those. I think there were 3 questions there, really. Equity, well, that means fairness, doesn't it? So what we want is to be fair and across the borough for all our children and young people, to make sure that wherever they come from, they have a fair opportunity. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything is always the same, because people don't start from the same base. But we want to have the outcomes, the best outcomes we can for children and young people. So we have an aim around equity and fairness to achieve that. Turning to your second point about the historic underachievement, this has been a long-standing issue in this borough, but of course it isn't just in Haringey, and many authorities that have the issues of attainment along various groups, and there's loads of work analysing all the various levels of attainment, and we've had some very successful work done, and I'm going to pass over to Anne to respond to questions 2 and 3 to expand on that.
Councillor, thank you very much for your question. As has been said earlier about the overall Ofsted judgments in our local area, 98 good and outstanding, our focus is on making sure that every child achieves the maximum that they're able to. And so we have separate groups that focus on where teachers come together with other educators and officers of the council to look at how we can better support Black Caribbean children. And we'll also have a group for those who are Turkish Kurdish. We want to develop our skills and expertise in those groups to be sure that we work with every cohort of children where there is need for improvement. So it will be no surprise. Well, we already have the virtual school for those who are in our care, and we have a lot of support for those who are from our SEND service. So our ambition and the targets are local to where the children are, to be sure that we support each of them to maximise their potential. Thank you. An action. Thank you. I'll leave it there.
Oh, did you have more to add? Sorry.
I just wanted to say that the service is developing an action plan with teachers to look at the broader development for the implementation of the wider strategy. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Any more
Chair,
questions?
do you mind if I come back on one there?
Okay, go ahead, and I'll bring in Councillor Over. She's got a question as well.
I'll be very quick. I understand that the definition of equity in terms of, giving people the support they need rather than giving blanket support to each and every person. I just wondered in terms of equity, in terms of experience and outcomes, I just wondered if you could explain what that meant, because I couldn't quite get my head around equity of experience.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Of course, children don't start in the same place. So if we want children to have a equity of experience, we might have to do more work with some groups than with others, because of course children come from a different starting point. And our goal is to work backwards from giving them the, if you like, work to the best outcomes. So enrichment, participation. That's why, for example, our summer programs in the Holiday and Activity Food Fund, for example, really target children who have come from poorer homes or children on free school meals, so they can get a richer experience. And in our schools, I know they work tirelessly to give children wider experience and to enjoy things they may not normally have access to. And it varies from school to school, but that's the aim and objective. I don't know if that explains it. I think it's a difficult question, or try to give you a clear answer.
No, that was helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Over.
Thanks, Leader. Page 1936, it's mentioned that early identification of additional need is critical, as is a whole school approach, and settings will be asked through the new inclusion charter to commit to a trauma-informed approach. How will this be monitored with schools to ensure that this is being done in terms of ensuring that these additional needs are met for these children? And secondly, we are aware that there are long CAMHS waiting times. Yeah. And in terms of my second question, it's in regards to the CAMHS waiting times. There are children with autism, ADHD waiting to be diagnosed. How do we ensure that these kids aren't falling through the gaps and they are being supported? Thanks.
On early identification, a lot of that work is happening in our nurseries and in our playgroups and in our nursery classes across the borough. And increasingly, I will ask Anne or Jackie to talk in more detail. Increasingly, the aim is to have an inclusive approach in the early years where children are supported, even if they have got some type of developmental need, but where they're not necessarily or have not been diagnosed. That doesn't mean you aren't doing the work. So the intervention takes place irrespective of the journey, hopefully not into special needs. Hopefully the early identification gets children to the path to normal development. But Jackie may want to respond more on that, and certainly on CAMS. I think I have to pass over to Jackie or to Anne.
Apologies, yeah. So in terms of the Inclusion Charter, we have a subgroup called the Inclusion and Access Strategic Group, and that is chaired by our Director for Schools and Learning, Jane Edwards. I'm also on that group too, and we have representation from schools. So the charter is in the process of being rolled out, and it'll be monitored through that group that meets on a bi-monthly basis.
And thank you, Councillor, for your question about trauma-informed approach. I think the ambition that certainly I think that we all want in children's is definitely to have a trauma-informed approach where that's appropriate in schools. And so we are speaking with our schools about that very matter, and where they are, where they want to employ it, then we support them to do so. We have one of our secondary schools that has done incredible work employing a trauma-informed approach. We have Kerry May's her work.
So we have the anchor approach.
Sorry, it just completely went from my head. So we have the anchor approach that we speak with all schools about to achieve that outcome. It's not imposed, it's encouraged, and we want to have that consistent language through all our schools and settings. In terms of CAMS, the wait times are very long. We work with the ICB and providers to improve pathways and capacity in the CAMS service, but we recognise there's further work to do there. Even though we're told that our wait times have improved, it's still very long wait times for our children. And so there remains further work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne and Jackie. So if we move to the resolution as set out 3.1 of the report, which is on page 1901 of the agenda. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, item 20, which is Rising Green Youth Hub. Councillor Brabazon.
Thank you. Rising Green is, I think we can say, a successful new, well, not quite so new now, but a youth club opened by the borough some years ago. And I would like to say, when I mentioned to colleagues across London that we'd opened a youth club, they were absolutely amazed, as a youth centre has been opened in a period of such difficult finances, particularly in children's services. And the purpose of this report is to ask Cabinet to continue supporting Rising Green to operate and continue to fund the running costs. This centre is located in Lymington Avenue and was developed with young people as a centre in the heart of the borough, where little or no provision was available for many years. And I think has been a really good example of another aspect of collaborative working, participation, the Haringey deal, and I think got an external award for the process. Spaces rented from the landlord, and the current lease is due to expire in May 2026, but we're hopeful that in principle a lease may be granted till May 2028, and this is contingent on funding, however, and formal heads of terms. It's a very popular and well-used centre, run for direct youth activities by the local authority, but also with many partners who use it during the week, and there is in fact a tutorial programme over the weekends, which is, I think, well used and popular. It has also become the base and home for the Wood Green Family Hub, which is part of the government's national Best Start programme. So our aim has been to maximise the use of the centre, recognising the huge investment that the council has put in, and also that we are paying for use of the space. It was funded from some community infrastructure levy, supporting families, family hubs and other sources. And the options are set out below, and in the report, paragraph 5.1, And the request is that Cabinet agrees additional funding to continue the centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon. Any questions from the Cabinet? No. Okay, Councillor Emery.
Thank you, Chair. This report item is specifically quite hard to scrutinise, as quite a lot of it is exempt. Can a ballpark figure be given for the costs being taken on by the council and thus the reductions that will need to be found in other budgets? And then the second question, then, is there any current plan for how costs will be reduced elsewhere in the children's service budget to compensate for this spend, particularly given, as we saw in item 9, the Children's Directorate is currently the area of the council which is most off track when it comes to implementing already agreed savings?
Before I bring Councillor Brabazon in, I guess it's worth noting that this isn't scrutiny, this is the Cabinet and questions are on the report, but I'll let Councillor Brabazon come back and I'm sure you can raise those questions at the Scrutiny Committee.
I'll pass the question about the costs to Anne or to Jackie. Sorry, can you repeat the second part? Because I was going to answer it. It's gone out of my head now. Could you just repeat your second?
It's specifically what's the current plan for costs to be reduced elsewhere to make room for this?
I think it would be to remind you that we're always trying to economise wherever we can, but children's services is one of those areas which is demand led.
The information, Councillor, is in the exempt part of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so we will return to the resolutions after considering the exempt information at item 31. So we can move to item 21, which is seeking approval to procure new dockless e-bike hire service contracts. Councillor Hakata.
Yes, so as some of you may have noticed, a number of green looking bikes have been travelling around the borough over the last sort of 2 years. They generally come in two shades, lime green and dark green. I think the principle being from the transport team that you can choose any colour you want as long as it's green. But to rewind back just past the 18 months, we've got to realise and put some context here that this was the Wild West, that the number of just lime bikes alone, trips in our borough were around 30,000 a month. And there was essentially no framework, no management, no oversight of that service. And obviously, that comes with huge amounts of issues and inconvenience to a lot of residents, even though it was obvious there was demand for what is obviously a sustainable mode of transport. And in a borough like ours, where half the borough is very hilly, a very convenient way of ensuring that people can use a bike and also not choose to not use a car. Our approach was we can either leave them as they are, and remember this is a completely unregulated area. There are no bylaws or anything managing the use of e-bikes, or we could take a managed approach, and that's the one we decided to do, where we kind of went into a semi-contractual agreement and arrangement with the providers, and in that agreement we saw a exponential rise in the trips being taken, and you'll see in this report there's now quite consistently over 200,000 trips a month taken on dockless bikes in this borough. So the demand for them is absolutely there. They are hugely successful. However, that success comes at a price. And we've been really clear that the use of these bikes, although we absolutely support them and we support there's many residents and we're seeing that across demographics using them, it's really important that it's a positive impact for all residents in this borough. And for that reason, we've been rolling out mandated parking bays, carriage bays on our carriageways, and we're now going to procurement on a proper contract. And I would just add that in the intervening months, we have been, as an administration, really lobbying hard, along with other Labour administrations in the capital, for government to come in with real regulations that can manage these services, so that we don't have to do it on our own, but there is something that one size fits all for all boroughs. And the government have said that that will come in as a devolution bill. So with this, this is coming to cabinet, basically to for us to go to procurement, to have a contract that works not only for the borough and for this council financially, as well as you know, in terms of logistics, but also for residents, so that we have a proper managed contract that we can hold the providers to account, and we can ensure that we get the best deal for Haringey Council and for Haringey residents. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Catton. I'm sure we will agree with the holding to account point. Councillor Chanwani.
Thank you. 2 points. Obviously, you do know that if I don't ask these questions, my husband won't let me in the door. But his bugbears are not unique to him. I mean, it's a lot of residents that keep raising these issues. The scattering of these bikes on pavements, they cause access issues. They are, you know, a trip hazard. They're not great for people with visual impairments. And it was horrible. So if we can get a response on how this is going to manage that and not increase that, that would be really good. And my second question is, there used to be this sound of newts that you could hear if you lived in the countryside, like little toads and frogs. And now the new urban thing you can hear around Tottenham is that croaking of a hacked Lime bike. And if you don't hear it, then you're a bit worried because you're wondering if you missed some sort of alert. What are these companies doing to stop their bikes being so badly hacked in the first place, that you're more likely to see somebody riding a hacked one than you're not? And what are they doing to stop that?
Got Rob and Maurice here who have been leading on this, but just as a quick one, just obviously we want to ensure that you don't get in trouble with indoors. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is obviously it's not just an issue in the Chanwani household and the concern, the anxiety about trip hazards from these bikes. It is all of our concern, and it's absolutely essential. And this has been one of the things that we've been absolutely laser focused on. One of the aspects has been what we've been doing up until now, which is deploying carriageway mandatory bays. So we've got 42 in the borough at present. We're going to have an additional 100 going in by the end of the year, and 250 in total by the end of next year. Now, these mandatory bays are having an impact. So we've seen 95% compliance with parking. However, we've seen that increase wherever we have mandatory bays. So we want to make sure that we continue to roll these out, because they are having a real positive impact on our pavements, and that means the most vulnerable people. And I'll just add one other thing, that in the procurement, what we have demanded, we've always been demanding that they do more in terms of the technology, the GPS tracking technology, which enforces considerate parking. And the conditions on that are that they can only deploy bikes with the latest technology, but officers can sort of pick that up and give some more details. And and the croaking, they can also cover that. So there are stipulations in terms of non-croaking bikes and how they're going to deal with it.
Thanks, Councillor. Maurice is Head of Transport and Travel. Just picking up on that, we have seen higher compliance since we've introduced our mandatory parking bays. The procurement of this new round of dockless bike will allow us to have more powers in terms of enforcement. So we'll go into a dynamic management situation where if operators are performing well they can have this fleet size. If not, we'll reduce this fleet size. This will mean there's more emphasis on the operators operating more considerately, as well as we will change the response time from 24 hours to 3 hours for them to respond to any bikes that deploy on the pavement. What we've seen since we've introduced those bays is higher compliance right across the bar. There's still work to do. I think it's a continuous dialogue in terms of how we liaise with our residents and the operators. But having a new procurement, a new contract where we have more stipulation in terms of what the Haringey residents require, and also from our members, will give us the powers to enforce that. In terms of the croaking, Lime is currently trying a lock-in mechanism. It's a lock, which will mean that the bike will be tamper-proof. Nothing is 100% tamper-proof, you say 100% on it, but it will improve the situation. I think as we move on with a new contract, we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 18 months. And we've seen higher compliance over the last 18 months, as well as user behavior. So one of the things we need to address is also teenagers using the bikes. And that will come as part of the new contract in terms of going into school and actually doing some education training and publicity around illegal hacking the bikes and the liability to actually doing that.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a very similar question to Seema, but as she's asked that one, I'm going to ask a slightly different one. I think we really welcome the dockless bike parking, and I've definitely seen improvements in some of the hotspots on that. So that is a positive. But so I wonder, given everything you've said about how we think things are going to change, do you then expect when we survey residents about dockless bikes, do you expect the dissatisfaction amongst non-cyclists to go down, because it's quite significant in the survey data in the report?
I would, Councillor. I think one of the greatest dissatisfaction of users is pavement cluttering and the bikes being on pavement. I said the strategy is to move the bikes off the pavement into the carriageway. With a rollout of additional mandatory parking bays. And the idea is to start getting a cluster, which is about almost every 100 meters away, which means that you are parking in a mandatory location off the pavement. I think you're right in terms of the survey. There was a larger dissatisfaction from non-bike users than there was. I think we have also consulted our accessibility group, and they've raised it as an issue in terms of partially sighted people on the pavement. So the overall strategy is to move away from pavement parking. So where we were like 18 months ago in terms of carriageway, pavement parking is much improved, and with the 250 bays, we'll have a cluster now. What we're doing now is targeting those locations like a high streets, high non-compliance location and high usage location. So we are pretty much data driven where we implement bays to try and address all those issues. And we are learning as we go along. So we had a common place, we've assessed that. Any new scheme will also have to have a common place and some form of feedback mechanism where we can continuously deploy the resource where we have the issues, as well as implementing new bays to address issues as they come up. And with any new contract, we have to have that built in that the operators will contribute to actually implementing those bays, so we can continuously learn and improve our service. As I said, we did an 18-month trial so we can learn. I don't think we've learned all the lessons yet. We have to continue to learn and develop as we move forward with the scheme.
Quick follow-up question as well. Sorry, I should have had this before. I know we've also sometimes seen issues with providers themselves bringing, naturally, because people want to use the bikes, they bring the bike into the space. And presumably all the things that you're saying also apply to that process where a supplier is putting bikes in a particular area, and we're asking them to be more careful about that because of the impacts we see on residents.
That is correct, Councillor. I think one of the things that we built into this contract is dynamic management, and we need to get the resources out of the contract so we can get the staff to do it. So if operators are performing well and cooperating, then they can have their fleet number. If they're not, then we'll reduce those fleet numbers and we'll find them similar to other boroughs.
Councillor Emery.
I'm afraid that none of those questions linked up to the questions I was going to ask. But they are very important questions, so I'm going to have to ask them, I'm afraid. 3 questions. The parking compliance statistics for Forest are incredibly low, despite improvements throughout the trial. Do you know why this is, and will it affect their chances when it comes to procurement? Second question, in terms of requests asking for a removal of a parking location, were they mainly due to the respondent suggesting a nearby alternative, or more to do with broad opposition to the scheme? And then lastly, the statistics used in the equity inclusion section appear to be comparisons of changes in the proportion of riders in each category, rather than of the numbers, which make the statistics presented virtually meaningless. Can these statistics be shared in terms of the number of people actually accessing the scheme? Is that a possibility? Thank you.
Sure, yep, I can pick those up. So forests do record their compliance slightly differently from Lime, and that's based on bikes being parked in the agreed location rather than bikes being parked correctly. So that will be a variance in terms of how the stats is reported there. So I can get the exact details on how they actually record that so we can compare them. In terms of requests for parking locations, I think there's a bit of both. So I think Common Place exercises demonstrated where residents would like to see Dr. Spy parking location. That has been overlaid with our GIS based on our high usage. So we need to look at high usage. For example, I can give you an example of Seven Sisters Station where we had a high non-compliance and high usage, and therefore we need to look at where in the closest bit on our network where we can provide a Dr. Spy bay that we can actually accommodate that usage. So overlaying that information in terms of residents' requests, high usage and high non-compliance help us to put our resources in the correct place. In terms of the numbers, we are very, I think it's a very difficult one, Council. I'm happy to have a meeting with you running through the numbers. The numbers are commercially sensitive, and we have to be very careful in terms of data that's shared with us openly with the operators in terms of forests, and it's a competitive market out there, especially going to procurement. But happy to have a separate meeting with you to run you through the actual physical numbers rather than percentages.
Thank you, Maurice. Okay, so if we can agree the resolutions as set out in 3.1 of the report, which is on page 1983 of the agenda. Are we all in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. And thank you for getting us to this point. I know it's been quite a hard slog, so thank you, Maurice and Rob. Okay, best till last, I believe. Item 22. So spaces to play, spaces to grow, Tottenham Parks projects for children and communities. Councillor Arkell.
Okay, thank you, Leader. In February, I announced the investment of £1.5 million to improve 8 parks in Tottenham and the Wood Green area, with all due works due for completion in March 2026. As mentioned earlier this evening by the Leader, our parks and green spaces are much loved by our residents, and this investment will enhance play facilities for children and young people, enabling them to socialise, play, learn and develop in safe environments. There are 5 parks, including Bruce Castle Park, Downhills Park, Lordship Rec, Markfield Park and White Hart Lane Rec, which will undergo major upgrades, and tonight I'm seeking approval from my colleagues to procure and to delegate contract awards. In line with both the Haringey deal and with the principles set out in the Parks and Green Spaces strategy, extensive community engagement has shaped the priorities, and a participatory budgetary pilot has enabled residents to allocate funds and rank design preferences. The designs for the new playground equipment prioritise accessibility, safety and climate resilience, and use sustainable materials as well as improving sightlines to reduce antisocial behaviour. The project supports many ambitions of this Labour administration's political priorities, including better resident experience, reducing inequalities and enhancing community safety. But most importantly, it will support the next generation by promoting healthy childhoods and strong communities.
Thank you, Councillor Arkell. Is there questions from the Cabinet on this item? Councillor Brabazon.
I think this is a great report on which to finish this meeting, and I know that we're all delighted to see new play areas being developed. Play is often underrated, and for children is most important part of their early development. So can you comment on the significance of this investment for the parks in the borough?
Thank you, Councillor Brabazon. I'm really pleased that you've asked that question because, as you say, play is a really important aspect for our children's learning and development in the borough. So, as you'll be aware, the Park Service budget is not statutory, and since austerity started in 2010, the Parks and Green Spaces budget year on year has been reduced. But this Labour Council has made a political decision to not make any further cuts. And the investment I'm seeking in Cabinet's approval this evening is one of the biggest single investments we've made into parks and green spaces. It will fund actually 8 parks and upgrades across Tottenham and Wood Green, including parks like White Hart Lane Rec, which is in Councillor Dasnev's wards, and it really needs it, as you will be able to see if you go and look at it. So this year already we've upgraded parks in Oliver Tambo Rec, Priory Park, Russell Park and Elizabeth Place. And last weekend I had the privilege of attending a community event in Finsbury Gardens in Bounds Green, and there were residents there who had taken and used Oliver Tambo Rec, taken their children and used Oliver Tambo Rec, and had actually spent the large part of their summer holidays using it, because it just shows how valuable that play equipment is for families living in that area. So the investment that's going into the parks in Tottenham and Wood Green is one of the biggest, I think, single investments that we've made, and is actually 4 times what we spent annually on play and sport equipment within the Core Capital programme. And when these playgrounds are finished, they will be really transformative for both families and children who are using them.
Thank you. Any more questions from the Cabinet? Councillor Emery.
Happy to report no questions for this item.
Councillor Emery's happy. That's good. Okay, so okay, if we can move to the resolution as set out on 3.1, page 2060 of the agenda. Are we all in agreement? Excellent. Okay, item 23, minutes of other bodies. Can we please note the minutes of the Cabinet member sign-ins from pages 2073 to 2126? Can we please note that? Item 24, significant and delegated actions. Can we note the significant and delegated actions taken by directors? Item 25, new items of urgent business. There are no new items of urgent business. Item 26, exclusion of the press and public. So items 27 to 31 allow for consideration of exempt information in relation to items 11, 15, 16, 18 and 20. Can I please move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting to consider this exempt information? And this is defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Do we all agree? Okay, so I'm formally closing the public section of this meeting. Thank you.